Hello, fellow heroes. Oh man, today I wanted to give you guys the 101 on Metaphor before we go in and play some more of it. Really, this game has kind of passed a lot of my expectations. I don't know why, because initially when I saw this game, I was like, oh, it looks like Persona, looks like it's going to be another Persona game. And Persona 3 was like my introduction into the Persona franchise. It was my introduction into kind of like turn-based RPGs. I played a little bit of Final Fantasy Tactics, and I played a good amount of Final Fantasy 7, but it was my introduction to kind of like modern RPGs that were coming out around the time my age was. So it was weird for me whenever I see something like dark and edgy, kind of like this game going on right here. I tend to not want to like it. I feel like when stuff is edgy, it makes me be like, I don't want to get into that edgy stuff. I don't like the dark and gloomy. I like more heroic and hopeful things. Metaphor, though, is that dark medieval sense, but it's still everything that Persona has to offer, with, you know, giving you that light of hope at the end of the tunnel to reach for, to push for, to strive for. And so going into Metaphor, I was like, okay, let's just see what this is about, and I love it. It has actually pushed past what I originally thought Persona 5 could do. Like, I thought Persona 5 was like the limit of what we would get in Persona games, because it had already like innovated and done enough with the genre, putting stealth. Can you believe that? Putting stealth into an RPG turn-based game, something we would have never thought to do in the past. And Atlas is publishing this game, so if you are a fan of Persona, Metaphor is going to give you, like, to the T, just about everything you want, except for like the relationships you get within the game. So, as before, you could romance some of your companions and get with them. Not so much in Metaphor. It's more or less getting the love of the people on your side, and that is kind of like going against this guy who, if you've seen Berserk, is a lot like Griffith, and I think that's a really good comparison between the two of them. But what Metaphor does differently, on top of like why it's better that I think than Persona 5 mechanically speaking. I'm not saying that, like, if you personally enjoy Persona 5 more, by all means, I understand, especially, there's Persona 4 and Persona 3 as well on top of that, but it takes that stealth aspect of the game, of the gameplay, and instead of running around and trying to sneak up behind someone or dealing with the encounter, you're actually, it's more of like a warrior, more of like a fighter, and you can go in and fight people before the battle. If they're weak enough, you could just end the fight right then and there. You don't have to worry about it. If they're weak enough, if you're strong enough, you could just end the fight. You hit them out in the world and that's it. But if they're too strong, then you have to do the classic turn-based style fighting, but you can give yourself the advantage like you did in Persona 5. Now, that alone, it doesn't stop there. Everyone on the team is essentially Joker from Persona 5, or any of the other Persona games where the protagonists got to like take on different types of personas, but now you can essentially make your party out the way you want to be. Me being kind of like the person that I am right now, I haven't fully dove into that. I myself am still stuck on the idea of like, oh, this person, she is like a knight, so I'm gonna keep her in her knight form, and this guy, he's a wizard, I want to keep him in his wizard form, and I'll be the one that flexes, which means I'm kind of the healer right now. But if you're not as like mentally stubborn about RPG as I am, definitely go into the game and flex whatever classes you want people to play, and then fit the class that you yourself want to fit in. And that's the thing about Metaphor, is it is more agency to a series that already gave its players a lot of agency. And on top of that comes a lot of quality of life things in the game that, you know, they through experience, kind of like whenever you go from playing Dark Souls to going to playing Elden Ring, you see the quality of life that you get from those games. That's like, okay, well, this is the things that we want to give our players. Just simple things like we saw a little bit right here with the transportation, just making it, even though you were already fast, they just made it an excuse to make you even faster whenever you're traveling through the open world. And little things like that add up to where if you've experienced Persona games in the past, you're more likely to be like, oh, okay, I'm glad we have this feature. Or if you're new to the series, like completely, you're going to be like, oh, wow, this is just real easy to jump in and get into. They integrate the tutorial system with your progression through the main game, so you actually probably don't really start the actual game till almost, I want to say 10 to 20 hours in, depending on how fast you go in your pacing. And that might seem daunting if you never played it before, but anyone who's played Persona understands, like, okay, this is the pacing that we're going to go through for the game. And this is the normal, you know, oh, okay, we've awoken. Oh, okay, now we're going to do our first dungeon. Oh, we're going to set up the things. So it's not crying away from Persona. I want to stop right here because of the art design. The art design at first made me not really care for the game. Again, it's got this edgy, dark, medieval look to it. But once you get into the story of the game, I think that's what really holds it all together. The story of the game complements the gameplay, complements the art design, the art choice of the game, and it also immerses you into the game as well. Feels like AI? It does. With how it's mashed together and stuff like that, I agree. It feels like AI. And whenever the game, from the outside looking in, when you look at this art design, you're kind of like, what the hell am I looking at? You could say, like chat just said, it feels like AI. But as you play the game and you get immersed into the world, because of the story, it all comes together and complements itself. I don't want to give too much away about the story. I will talk on a technical aspect when it comes to story, because you guys know how much I love to critique, and I do like to speak in a critical language when it comes to storytelling. They do a fantastic job at setting up the plot and giving us stakes, giving us what our characters want, and also setting up urgency. They're not just giving you a mystery box and saying, hey, there's something that's going on, why don't you figure out what's going on? No, there is goals for you to go to, and you get rewarded through story. You get to learn more about the game essentially by playing the story, which then gives you more mystery box, but then before you get to that mystery box, you're given more goals. And so you're learning as you're playing, and you're being entertained, and that entertainment turns into immersion. And the reason it's immersive is because you're the outside looking in. This game doesn't really try a lot to relate to its audience, like a lot of other games you could say, and for lack of better words, I could say like Concord. I think Concord tried too hard to relate to its audience, whereas this game is telling its own story, and it is relatable through the story that it is telling. There are a lot of people that are racist. Even though you look human, you're not considered human, and people hate you because you look different, and that stems from it. And as you learn about the races, you understand that like some races have religion that they like to keep away from other races because they don't want their religion to be diluted. And then that makes those races not trust them because they're like, hey, why are you hiding your religion from us? And they're doing it to protect themselves, and at the same time they're doing it because, you know, they're scared of each other. And that's kind of like, there's like a whole point in the game where you have this book, and it's a fantasy story book, but it's about our time. It's like the 21st century in the book, and it talks about how there's only one race and how they all get along and and it's like, oh, well, you know, that's anything from the truth. But the book is essentially a metaphor for the game. And you're like, oh, but that's the name of the game. And yes, yeah. And it all just comes together, and it's a beautiful game. So I would definitely recommend this game if you're already a fan of the Persona series, and if you're interested, like young Mario at the young age of 13 years old, who saw Persona 3 and was like, I don't know what this is. I don't know anything about anything. I'm gonna try it. If you're interested in turn-based RPG games and you don't know where to look, Metaphor is a great starting place. It's probably too good of a starting place because it gives you, it puts your expectations so high, but at least you'll know where the standard is. And if you're not into this kind of stuff, well, that's fine too. But I would definitely recommend Metaphor ReFantazio. ReFantazio? That word down there. And that's the 101. That's kind of my first impressions. We're on the dungeon right now. If you want to see more reviews or first impressions on TV shows, movies, and video games, like, subscribe down below. And until next time, guys, play nice.